two, one. Oh, never mind. We're live. Facebook world. Paul Sterling here with my friend Candace. I'm from Carmel Valley, California, and Candace is from the coast there. We're getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, welcome tonight. We're going to be talking about courageous love and having a brave heart. And it's what does it take to actively go out and be what I call voluntarily vulnerable, you know. So I'm going to ask you to participate as if Candace and I can see you. And there's some irony in that in multiple ways, but we're going to pretend we can see you. So if I ask you to raise your hand, if you could raise your hand, how many of you out there in Facebook land have ever had your heart broken? So let me see, there's me raising my hand. Candace raising two hands. How many had it broken more than once? So I'm raising my hand again. And so the act of love is the willingness to go and again be voluntarily vulnerable, as my friend Allison Armstrong. Actually, I'm liberally calling her my friend. She's been on my I've interviewed her, and she is my mentor and one of the brilliant relationship coaches out there on the planet. So we're going to dive into that tonight, and it'd be great to hear and interact, find out where you're typing in from. So again, I'm Paul Sterling. I'm the author of Argue Less, Love More, a best-selling book on Amazon. And I'm here with Candace, and we see some people from around the world, and Daniel's chiming in from Canada, and somebody else is saying hi and yes. So where are you all in from? And so I'm going to hand it to you, Candace. What do you want to say about yourself and relationships?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Candace. I am in New Hampshire. I was so excited to have another opportunity to dive in with you. Whew, man, relationships. Every time I find myself in one of these talks with you, or often, we automatically start thinking about romance and our romantic relationships. And then, so if we don't have that going on, we're single, or if we're already coupled and everything seems like it's fine, we don't see relationship work or coaching or education as a necessity. But I find and feel that this should be a part of the regular curriculum for public schools, for our children. It's a part of our human structure. We are social creatures. How and the ways in which you choose to relate to the world, there's so many possibilities. And I've had a lot of messes, and I grew up surrounded by relationship disasters and a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And I did not have education, nor did I have positive role models. And so probably, around the age of 21, I made a decision to change my life, and have been on a journey since then, initially trying to learn how to relate to this. And I was like, I'm not doing I was keeping romantic relationships out of the equation because those were the major problem. I was just like, we're not doing that for a little while. And yeah, I've been on my own personal journey to learn how I can strengthen my skills to relate as a human being, as well as a coach. and an educator myself for the last,
So,
I've kind of been serving in that way too since then.
Candace, let me jump in because you said something that I want people to get a hold of. That there's two different ways to look at relationships, and one is the way that Hollywood serves them up, which is, well, there's a lot of mix, but I call it the Disney world, which is the happily ever after. So if I just find the right person, then journey over, I've arrived at vacation land and it's going to be happily ever after. Or the other one is the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is when you get together, the journey starts, the hard work starts. It will stretch you. It's an adventure. It's painful. That's why I call it courageous, because if you've, and I had people raise their hand, if you've ever had your heart broken, raise your hand, and that takes courage to get back in there. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the skills, like Candace, you've learned along the way, I've learned along the way, the skills that people need and the choices you need to make, because there's a difference between a skill and a choice. So like when relationships get painful, there's a choice you have to make. Do you end up making your partner the enemy, or do you end up growing and learning? And by the way, hi, Wayne. Where are you calling in from? Glad to see you on there. And check in when you join us. It'd be great to just see where you're typing in from. And all right, so we're going to dive in. I've got some slides here, and then we're going to go back and forth. And I'm going to ask Candace some questions. She can ask me questions. And the one thing I want to say about relationship coaches and coaching is that almost every master started out as a disaster. So I'm going to share my early disasters on relationships, and we're going to dive in. All right, here we go. So I have a picture up, Candace. Our world is changing, and it's a fall scene in New England. And here's part of what's changing in our world right now. There's a picture of the planet. And so our globe is changing because we're connected to Hollywood. We're connected to the internet. We're connected to, our expectations are changing because people see movies. They see, it's like people for years watched Dallas from all these different countries and thought all of America was like Dallas. And people watch Disney and think all relationships are like Disney, you happily ever after. And so what's happened is our expectations of what we want in a relationship has changed, but our training hasn't. The other things that have impacted us, which I just want you to think about this, like the big changes that are almost invisible to us. We've gone from the Stone Age, the agricultural age, the industrial age, the technology age. Why is that important? Well, each age changed our expectations, and the Stone Age, might make right. Agricultural age, strength was power. Even in the industrial age, strength is power. In the technological age, smart is better than strong in a lot of ways. And I'm going to tie this in and how this all fits together. And Candace, I'm going to want your feminine look at it. You may not have heard me say this part before. But see, what happened with the feminine revolution, women shifted and no longer needed men anymore. So they were willing to put up with less in a relationship, less crap, less abuse, less, because they didn't need a relationship. And when we went from like the agricultural age to the industrial age to the technology age, women are easily as smart as men and often smarter, so they can earn as much. So they don't, there's not as much neediness in that form of relationships. So it's totally changed the dynamics of relationships. but we haven't been trained in this new world. We know we want more. You know, you can go on Match.com or Tinder or all these different dating sites and looking, there's a whole world of opportunity. But once you get that opportunity, what are you going to do with it? So, Candace, what are your thoughts on what I just was sharing there?
Wow. So some of the first things that come up are on a personal level. I remember, very clearly, growing up, and although I saw that my mom was heavily reliant on these male partners, I remember still like somehow receiving a message of don't do this when she wasn't doing it. And I had a very strong, like, I don't need no one kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now as a blind person, I'm getting, like, I'm newly blind. So just like, if you don't know me, I haven't been this blind to this degree forever. So long story, but I've come to learn, well, now I am heavily reliant on other people to get my basic needs met. And so I have been saying this a lot, like, I've learned how to relate and work on a lot of my stuff as a sighted person. But this is doing this as a non-sighted person with this new level of need. Whoa, is it bringing up all that stuff that I thought I dealt with? Usually, I want to say, even if you put gender aside, on a humanity level, but then if we talk about our transition of time, the transitions of our gender awareness, of the multitudes of variations of gender identification, and the way we're relating on a human level to our masculinity, our femininity, from roles to what we're wearing. Like, whoa, we never had all these choices.
Right. It's like a kid in a candy shop, but the problem is the kid in the candy shop, if they don't have self-discipline and learn about it.
We don't have education. Yeah, that's
right. And it's great. Daniel Riverin says, as a Native person, I see life and love relationships as going through cycles of maturity. I hope so. Some people get mature, some people just get older. And I'm Danielle, I'm seeing maturity in your definition there. I'm making it up for myself, but as wisdom, and some people get older and never get wiser. And the whole idea here is hopefully to get wiser. What have I learned? Because I spent years as a quality control problem solver. I was a consultant that traveled around the world, and what I needed to do was come in and solve problems either for the government or for businesses that they couldn't solve themselves. And this was pretty smart people that I was working with. And what I would do is try to make the invisible visible. And how this ties into relationships is symptoms are visible, systems are invisible. I'm going to say that again. Symptoms are visible, systems are invisible. That's why when you go to see the doctor, they hook you up to, if it's for the heart, an EKG machine, or take your temperature, or do all these different things to make the system visible. So what I wanted to do is do that with the world of relationships. How do we see what's going on? Because otherwise what happens is we start attacking each other and we make each other wrong. So this today is going to be how to identify some of the habits, patterns, and beliefs that get in the way of connecting with each other. And I'm going to bring up another slide here. And on this slide, I typed in, it's a picture of Google and it says diet advice. And when I clicked in diet advice on Google, it showed up 26,900,000 different results in 19 seconds or 0.19. I don't know if that's 19 seconds or 0.19 seconds. Then I typed in relationship advice. And relationship advice had 94,800,000 results in 0.32 seconds. So people who are on the call tonight, I just want to say, I don't think you're here for more information. If you want information, just type relationship advice in Google. You know, if you're like me, you probably read all 96 million reports. No, I didn't. I read some really, I studied with some very powerful people, including one of my first bosses was Tony Robbins, early on in this world of personal growth. All right, you are here. I'm telling you why you're here. You can tell me I am all wrong, but I'm telling you why I think you're here. You're here because there's a gap between where you are right now and where you know you could be, where you know your relationship could be, where your communication could be. So, Candace, would you be willing to share what the gap is for you? And I'm going to go turn my phone up.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, it just seems reminding me earlier on the Self-Love Show, another great show with Trish and Don on Love Coach Academy. Trish was sharing about how, like, just really nobody wants to be alone. I don't think, you know, it's Sarah, I don't think any client or anybody's ever going to come to me and say, I'm happy alone. I'm great this way. I just want to stay this way forever. I don't want any relationships. I don't need no one. And I'm happy that way. I don't, you know, that is the truth right now. I don't have the relationships I dream for and desire. And that's not what I want for myself. I want community, tribe, family. I have dreams of children. And I'm here to figure out what is in the way.
Yeah, and there's actually, it's interesting, there's 7 main areas that that I coach people on, that if you get these worked out, your relationship tends to be great. So it's like communication, and that's the biggest challenge. It's been a challenge for me for most of my life. Even though I've studied it, like I said, originally with Tony Robbins, and then nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg and a bunch of other people, but it's still occasionally an issue, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So there's communication, there's conflict resolution, there's dealing with patterns, habits, patterns, and beliefs. And the problem with patterns is what makes it a pattern is it's invisible to us, Candace. So you remember I was talking about the difference between symptoms and systems are visible and patterns are invisible to us. They're familiar, like, oh, I'm in that part where I make my partner wrong, or I start to sabotage the relationship, or it's like I start to communicate in a way that makes me small, or I collapse. So there's like all of these patterns that if we don't identify them, they run the relationship and will wreck it. And if you can start to label it, it becomes you and your partner battling the patterns. Tony used to call it pattern interrupt, you know, and he was a master and still is a master at interrupting people's patterns. And he would interrupt them so outrageously that sometimes they'd have a hard time ever going back to that same limiting pattern again. So as I'm saying that, Candace, what comes to your mind about patterns that may get in your way or may trip you up?
Mm, um, self-defeating, self-abandonment patterns. Um, yeah, these letting the story run the show. Um, and therefore, like, basically discluding myself from the relationship. Um, yeah, that's kind of like the pattern I'm noticing for myself, say, like, in this big gap of these last couple of years with the going blind and the most alone I've been. um, this is the pattern that I'm coming to find is what's happening up here and the stories I'm creating.
Yeah, and I have some patterns of, one of the, it's like, and by the way, for the people who are listening, if when you start to see a pattern, you feel a wave of shame or embarrassment or discomfort wash over you, that's really a good sign. It's a sign you're like looking at a juicy pattern that doesn't want to be seen. So some of my patterns that don't want to be seen are like, you started it. I have the you started it pattern. And see, when somebody's there, there's what's the expression? There's no cheese down that tunnel. There's no way to win. Because as soon as I can tell somebody that they started it, what do? They look and go, no, you started it. And it's this downward spiral, and it creates this huge gap between us. So I'm going to show sort of a list of some of the side effects of what happens when there's a pattern. And as you can identify your patterns, it would be great if you share them on there. You'll find out when you share your pattern, you're not alone. These are very common. But here's some things about patterns. So across the top, Candace, I have a list of different behaviors that we do when we're fully resourced. And at the bottom, it's when the pattern takes over. So this, and there's an arrow between them. Whoops. Okay, learning how to use my machine here. I am circling. So at the top, it's resourceful. And then what happens when we get triggered and our patterns take over, we move from being resourceful to being reactive. We move from being connected, this is to being not connected. When we're running the show, there's a high level of trust. When the pattern is running the show, there is low or no trust. And this one is a critical one to watch out for in any sort of argument. It's when we feel connected, we feel like allies in the relationship. And this can be any relationship. This is what scares me about America right now, is that to me, what makes America or had made America great is that we were allies with each other, with our neighbors, with everybody next to us. And we're starting to go from feeling like allies to feeling like enemies. And that's a bad place for any relationship, whether it's with your partner, with your neighbor, with, government. So it's the idea is to make sure to catch it before the pattern takes over. And when we get really triggered, we stop being conscious. So anything you want to add to that so far? There's about 3 more I'm going to do.
Yeah. We actually, our topic for the Triggers to Treasure show this week was enemy versus ally image. And so I just got a nice deep dive in this. And it's exactly linked to what I was sharing. Sorry, I'm tired. It's late over here on the East Coast. About my pattern. So basically, when I put myself down, I am, even though to me, it may feel like I'm just creating an enemy out of me. But what I did is I created an enemy with that other person too. Because
Yeah.
I'm basically therefore saying that they're a no to me or whatever. I'm not creating an ally, that's for sure. So I'm enemizing me and the possibility of someone else before you even get there.
Enemizing. I hadn't heard that. I'm going to borrow that.
I don't know if it's real. I keep
It
saying
doesn't
it.
matter. All words were made up at some point.
Yeah.
So you may have just made it up. I'm going to be quoting you. Enemization. That could be misinterpreted. I had an enemization. All right. Then, and I'm going to bring up the picture again. When we're connected, we feel present. We're in the present time. We're with each other. And when the pattern's running the show, we're not connected. We're stuck in the past or the future. I remember when you did this, and I don't trust you because you broke my heart in the past, or somebody else broke my heart in the past, and I'm not going to trust you. I'm never going to let that happen again. And so I can be intimate or I can be guarded. And that's one of the other ones. I can be open and honest or defensive. So what I want people to look at is look at the bottom down here. Reactive, not connected, low trust, enemy, pattern running the show, guarded, defensive. That is, and I'm going to write it, and you can disagree if you want, but that actually is normal communication. That is, you look at what's going on in relationships right now with over 50% divorce, and that doesn't include all of the relationships where they were never married. That's normal. Look at the governments, look at the behavior in business right now, and see at the top, that is, brave or courageous. That's a choice. That's building a muscle. To choose to be resourceful, to choose to be connected, high trust, ally, present, intimate, open and honest. That is not normal. That's courageous. That's getting outside of your comfort zone. And let me see, I'm going to find a space here. All right. I am drawing a picture, Candace. It's 3 circles. The center one says CZ, comfort zone. The second circle outside of it is like a bullseye target, is GZ for growth zone. And the third one is TZ for terror zone. And so the whole idea, if you want to have an amazing relationship, it's getting out of your comfort zone and growing and stretching and being comfortable with uncomfortable feelings. If I'm feeling embarrassed or ashamed or needy or all of these feelings we're taught that are bad, it's like, how do we start to grow in there? This is where intimacy happens, is in the growth zone. The terror zone is where we stop learning. We're looking for the enemy. Who's the enemy? Who's the ally? We're trying to protect ourselves. We want to feel safe again. And the thing about this, and Candace, you brought this up, and I've brought it up in different ways, but growing up, we both had our own experiences of trauma and drama. And that comes into our current patterns of behavior. Like in my family, there was, my dad was Irish, alcoholic, recovering Catholic, drunk, and he could be great. Now, I know when I say it, there are plenty of amazing qualities my dad had, and he could be a total asshole. And he could, one of his favorite things was to say, you want something to cry about? I'll give you something to cry about. Now, I would go, no, Dad, it's taken care of. My brother has already beat the hell out of me and tormented me. I'm set. I'm all set. I got enough pain last a month. The problem with the trauma and drama is it gets almost conditioned into our bodies. And so when we get re-triggered as an adult, if we haven't handled it, a lot of those old habits and patterns kick back in. And I'm about to show you what that looks like in a second. But before I do, Candace, is there anything you want to say about trauma and drama patterns?
Oh man. Ah, yeah. I've had some fresh experiences to really see the parts of me that are still carrying some memories from my childhood. Um, and I think the piece that I'm comfortable sharing about right now is just really reminding me of these circles that you're talking about and the comfort zone and the growth zone, the terror zone. And there's like really getting to know what all of these are. Like, if I could find a way, all those things that make me really comfortable and invite those into my growth zone, and I'd probably have less terror zones.
Yeah.
And just really knowing, like, I want to stretch, but I end up getting triggered often when I've overstretched myself. Um, Sometimes we don't know when we could catch ourselves before we end up in that fiery kind of container.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
nodding. Just so you know, I'm nodding my head.
yeah,
um, and I have an expression for that, but it's easier to handle an acorn than an oak. And there was a book out there, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. I think that's wrong. I'm sorry, but I think it is wrong. I think sweat might be the wrong thing, but to get it when it is small, our mutual friend and coach, a brilliant coach, Scott Katamas from Love Coach Academy, he's got this thing, green light, yellow light, red light. It's like catch it before it gets to red light, which is an explosive upset. Catch it early. And when it's at yellow light, go back to connecting, and stop trying to prove a point or make them wrong or, like explaining things. Go back to, can I hold you for a minute, or will you hold me for a minute? And by the way, I put this up here a while ago. I didn't say anything about it, and I want to. If people go to arguelesslovemore.net/survey, they can find out which of the 7 core issues is causing most of the problem in their relationship. And if they go and take this with their partner, they can print it out and hold them side by side and go, wow, look at where our relationship is. Or you can actually get a 15 to 30-minute free coaching session with me if you're really committed to making a difference in your relationship. Because what happens in those sessions is we look at where you are, where you want to go, what's in the way, and give you a plan. And then talk about if working with me or one of the other love coaches at Love Coach Academy would be helpful. I look at people, well, I'm going to draw a picture, and then okay. My art class is happening here. So it's a bell curve, Candace, with the 5 different areas that people are in relationships. All the way on the left-hand side, I'm dyslexic, but is crisis. The next one up, conflict, stuck in a rut, good, and then great. I added an extra one in there. So the thing is, if you're in crisis right now or conflict or even stuck in a rut, get help from the outside world. Find a coach, find a mentor, find a therapist, find somebody. It's sort of like when I broke my hand, I went over the handlebars of my bike. I did not go to the bookstore, Barnes and Noble or Amazon, and go, let me get a book on how to fix a broken hand. I went to the emergency room. I went to the doctor. I got an x-ray. They put a splint on it. I still have the splint, a reminder, you know. So if your relationship is in crisis or conflict, get external help, because it's unlikely that picking up and reading a book, reading an article is going to make the difference you need. Anyway, that makes sense, I hope.
Mhm. Even if, one thing I want to say is that, like, I'm an advocate for self-education, and, we're advocating getting the tools and educating yourself. But man, there's nothing like someone who knows the job. And it's also really hard to navigate relationship challenges with your partner without an outside source. It's
It
it's hard
becomes,
not to trigger each other. That's what you guys do. That's your job. You trigger each other.
so Candace, put your hands together in prayer form right in front of you. You may have done this with me before, but I need you to be my example. And I'm going to bring this up for the screen. Everybody, hold your hands right there. When I say press really hard with your right hand. Press harder, press harder, press harder. Okay, stop. Leave your hands where they are, Candace. Where are your hands? Are they in the same places when they started?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I said press really hard with your right hand. What did your left hand do?
Oh, it fought back.
Why?
It doesn't like to be pushed around.
So, see, that's the key thing about communication. If it feels like somebody's pushing us, what do? We push back, even if it's ourselves. I'm going to make you not eat chocolate cake. Oh, you can't make me not eat chocolate cake. I'm going to make you exercise. No, you can't. I'm going to make you quit smoking. No, you're not. So it's like anytime that we get in the world of force, what we get is resistance. And the challenge is, the more important the beautiful need is that we have, the more tempting it is to turn our request into a demand. Does that make sense? So there are 3 places we can communicate from. And this, hopefully, like, you walk away, and I'm talking to everybody that's on there in Facebook land, that you take a snapshot of this and you look at this, you post this thing up on the refrigerator and go, where am I communicating from? Because if you're not aware of this, it's really easy to drop down to the trauma drama line. So I'm bringing up the picture and I'll describe it to you, Candace. It is, it's a bell curve again, but just think of it almost as a pyramid with 3 points: the lower left-hand side, the lower right-hand side, and then at the top at the point. The bottom line from the left-hand side to the right-hand side is the reactive line. And when I'm down in that lower left-hand corner, if I get triggered, one of my patterns is to collapse. And I have a picture of my puppy, who, that looks like at about 8 months old, upside down on his back with his paws in the air. Anytime a big dog would come at my dog, and he's still somewhat of a puppy, even though he's about a year old, he collapses. And it's like, I give up, you win, I lose. Now, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I'm 230 pounds, probably more since the whole social distancing, not exercising as much. And it's still my pattern. And for years, I had no compassion with myself about my pattern. I would collapse and then I would beat myself up for collapsing. And what happens in collapse is lose win. You lose, I lose, you win. You can have whatever you want. And that's what happened in my family. I kind of got conditioned to lose win. Many women have been conditioned to lose win because the masculine is stronger, more dominant, or somebody's more dominant in their world. And so we go to collapse for safety. It's not a judgment. It's not like this is a good or a bad. So one point is collapse. And I'm going to give you the other point, and then I'm going to get your feedback, Candace. So opposite, when you flip the coin from collapsed, the other side of it is combative. That was my older brother. He had to win if it cost him his life. It was like no matter what, he had to win. And he was combative. And he didn't care if you lost. In fact, when it came to me, he preferred that I lost. To give you an example, my younger brother reminded me of this. In a poker game, my older brother had folded, and I was playing against one other guy. And rather than my brother let me win, he started sponsoring the other guy and giving him money so that no matter what, I lost, even though my brother wasn't even in the game anymore. And that can break you emotionally. So the trauma, drama, reactive line, either combative or collapsing. So what do you have to say about that? And where do you, I want people who are listening in, where do you go in when there's an upset in the relationship? And we do have a third place we can go, but I'm going to just get some feedback from Candace on collapsed and combative.
So I always feel this calling to speak into the collapse piece from like a really compassionate, understanding place. And I'm really glad you brought that up because I am one of those people. It's like, oh, I found something that I'm doing. Let's beat myself up forever now. But I've really, I've been digging into this collapse piece, and the piece that I feel like I really want to dig into, especially when we're dealing with trauma. For me, as a child, if I didn't collapse, that meant that my life was going to be further at risk, or things were going to get worse.
So, hold on, Candace.
Yeah.
Take a second, and I want you to say that again so that people can actually find it in themselves. It's not to hear you again, but to look inside themselves. It's
when you're outside world, especially when you're young, and these people are supposed to be taking care of you in your safety, and they're not. Your outside world becomes too much. You internally almost like leave your body.
Yeah.
You can't leave the room. You can't go anywhere else. This is your home. And so we learn at a young age sometimes to collapse inside.
Yeah, and it's about, and I'm writing in, safety, protection. It's whatever patterns we learn every pattern was started with a beautiful need in mind. And I asked my mom, I asked her afterwards, like, why didn't you protect me from my brother? And it was harsh abuse. And she said, I tried. And any time that I tried to protect you, he made it worse. He punished her and me for being protected by being more violent. And so she was a victim of it too. So we have collapsed. And thank you for that. definition of it, so that people can have compassion for themselves wherever they are, and having compassion for yourself to be combative. I'm starting to have compassion for my older brother. Like, he did not have a choice. He was driven to be combative. And the third one, though, the one that I work on, which is what this whole talk has been about, is how to be courageous. Courageous means comes from courage, comes from the core, come from the heart. To be compassionate, to be brave, and part of the reason I enjoy doing these calls with Candace as much as I do is because she's about one of the bravest women I know. The most courageous, comes from her heart, and even though life has dealt some bumpy hands, I see you lean in, Candace, and go, all right, this sucks, but what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about that? And by the way, it would be really helpful to us if, while you're watching, type in when you get an aha, when you get something that resonates with you. Because this show, Candace and I are doing it, but it's not about Candace and I. We're just being voluntarily vulnerable for you to see some reflection of yourself that can help you in your relationship. So what are you getting from this? If you could type it in, and then Candace, maybe you could share about courageous too.
So I had a little chuckle when you said courageous, because especially when I start thinking about my trauma and my childhood, I remember wanting to be combative so bad. If I could be combative, that meant I was courageous. I grew up thinking that combative was courageous. And I didn't have it in me, though. And so just thinking about our human experience, and there's so much empathy for how we end up the way we end up. And when when I'm courageous, it involves both leaning out to lean into myself from whatever the situation or the person is, as well as a leaning in. And when I think about the duality of combative and collapsing, there's some similar. So combative is that energy, I'm going to put energy in, I'm going to work with this. And if we look at another side of that on the more positive, it's that leaning in, putting the energy in. Then the other side of that part of you that just needs to dip out and collapse. Maybe, that's what you need. I know when I'm feeling combative, that means there is something we need to talk about. Doesn't mean we should talk about it right now, though. I might need to go take a break for a little bit. Or, when I'm feeling sometimes I don't consciously collapse. Collapsing is, both of these things can happen without any conscious choice involved. So that's another thing I want to point out. As we learn, we will begin to be able to slow things down and, not get to some of these more intense places. But yeah, the other side of collapse for me that I feel brings me there a lot is that I am that person that does require a lot of me time, processing time, and spaciousness. And I'm very sensitive.
And I just brought up, so a slide, lean in, lean out. And you brought up a different kind of lean out, though, that I want to address. Because, and Chantal just said, I'm really connected when you said force will be met with resistance. I struggle with that often. whether it's me putting force on myself or other relationships, I resist as a first instinct. It is normal. See, this is a challenge with leadership today. It's like, are we going to try to force and get resistance? The more that we try to force, the more resistance we get. And I've been studying this for 25, 30 years. I taught in prison for 8.5 years. So I know a lot about this. And I want to bring up something, Candace, that I think is critical here. I'm going to draw it here, but people, and this is going to be sort of wrapping up towards the end here, it's called the attachment theory. And now this is 2 seconds attachment. This is 2 seconds on something that you could spend hours, days, weeks studying. But there is what's called the avoidant, and I don't really like these terms, and the pursuant. And this is why it's really important to know, like for Candace to know this about herself and for her partner to know it about her. Because what happens when triggered, when somebody's triggered, they either go to avoidant or pursuant. Now, triggered to me is when your nervous system gets agitated, and what we're trying to do is find a way to calm the nervous system down. For an avoidant, like Candace just described, and there are a lot of us out there. I used to be a pursuant, I'm now more of avoidant. We need space so that we can focus internally, because I can't focus externally and internally at the same time. I can't like protect myself from the outside world or my partner's attack and go inside and feel what I'm feeling. So I can either go inside or I can be outside paying attention to somebody. So if I'm upset and want to calm myself down, I might go for a mountain bike ride and find a way to calm myself down. Does that resonate with you, Candace?
Yeah, it's exactly, I was speaking into, like, yeah, we're using terms and words that you could see as a label. And definitely these are not, there's no reason for judgment. These are not diagnoses or good, bad, right, wrong. This is us. This is human behavior. Like Paul said, this is normal. We're just trying to figure out what our normal is so we can therefore learn how to, flow within the world. And effectively educate in others, those that we're relating to.
Yeah. So let me give the other half, which is pursuant. So when a pursuant's nervous system gets agitated, and it comes from pursuants tend to have abandonment issues. So I had lots of abandonment issues. So early on in relationships, I was more pursuant than avoidant. I have evolved. But what a pursuant does is, if there's an upset in the relationship, for their nervous system to calm down, the relationship has to calm down. So I'm focused externally when I'm in the pursuant mode. And if we're not okay, I'm not okay. And so I've literally had clients that have told me that and they tend to match up pretty well, avoidance and pursuance. And so I've had somebody say, he's the avoidant and he's like running down the road, literally, like he's got to get away to calm his nervous system down. And she's chasing after him like, if you leave, you don't love me. And he's like, if I'm leaving because I love you. If I stay right now, it's not going to go well. So it's important to know whether you're more avoidant and more pursuant, and it can change relationship to relationship or over time. So that is key here. And this is, and I put back up, Candace, the collapsed, courageous, combative triangle. And by the way, I have the combative, I have a reptile there. I have a dinosaur, actually, with, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, because we get in our dinosaur mind. And when we're in combative, we have very limited options. We have fight, flight, or freeze. By the way, I am dyslexic and ADD and grammatically impaired. And so me writing in public, and because I'm drawing on the slides, Candace, it's like I can break out in a sweat. It's bad enough when I'm doing this by myself, but I'm doing it in public. Oh my God. That is my total act of love. So
there's I've heard of another one in there, fawn, which is similar to collapse, from what I think I hear of it.
yeah.
Fawn, just like la da da.
Well, I want to offer people, we're wrapping it up. Thank you for letting me know what you got out of it. I'm seeing some of the stuff that you put up there on, in the comments, and some of it, I don't get all of it at once. So I'm responding to the ones I see, and I'll go back and try to respond to all of them. But here we are, we're getting to the end, and it's decision time. And so one of the things you can do is go back to business as usual. What's a normal relationship? It says proactive or no active, and it's a guy standing at a trail, and there's a dark trail, no active, and there's a light trail, proactive. So it's like, now that you got information, but information not going to change your relationship. All the information in the world, like go search Google 96 million hit or different results. That's not going to make an ounce of difference in your relationship. It's when you implement information that you start to create transformation. And when I do something like this from the beginning, I've had coaches. Luckily, just pure luckily, I stumbled on Tony Robbins when I was in my 20s, I think, and ended up being on his staff. I was on stage at one point. I was the guy introducing Tony at some of the events. And then I ended up working for him. He ended up being my boss. And then years later, he hired me to come back in and teach his inner circle. And Tony introduced me on stage, and that was a cool day when Tony did my introduction. But what I'm saying, though, is it's a journey, and having a great relationship is not luck, it's skill and commitment. And find somebody that you trust, that will push your envelope, that you will hold you accountable to what you want to learn, that will help you grow and become more. Because it's not something like, I have clients ranging from lawyers to literally, I have one woman that's a rocket scientist. These are some really smart people. And Hollywood kind of gives us the illusion that if you're smart enough, if you're successful enough, if you love each other enough, if you're handsome enough or beautiful enough, or have the right makeup, or drive the right car, or live in the right neighborhood, or have the right kids, your relationship's going to be great, no problem. I'm sorry. Not, you know what? The way I look at it is, relationships are like climbing Mount Everest. You can have all the training in the world, and you can have the best equipment, but that mountain will kick your ass at times. So it's get coached, get training, get, on the mountain, and then stay there. Learn, commit, and grow. And like I started this with every master started out as a disaster. I have been a relationship disaster more times than I can count. I went through 1 divorce, 4 broken engagements. The book I wrote, The Argue Less, Love More, the reason that I wrote that book is I noticed the mistakes I made in my life and the patterns I had. So I would love it if anybody else wanted to share, type in what you got from this time. And Candace, I'd like to see what's your closing remarks. And thank you so much for being on this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Um, mm, yeah, just I can't emphasize it enough. Um, the really giving ourselves a lot of empathy. Um, we're not going to get better. A part of expanding our capacity to have amazing relationships in the world does not have to involve beating yourself up.
Yes.
Taking conscious responsibility is a loving act to you and everyone around you. And I'm just, Love Coach Academy has been monumental in my world. So I know whether you're with Paul or any of the other coaches, any of the other shows, just really great people. And yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, and there's a link to Love Coach Academy in the write-up. So I'm going to end on 2 quotes. The first quote is, "Ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for." And if you think about it, your heart is safe if you don't get in a relationship, but that's not what your heart is for. And the second quote is, if you want to be successful, learn how to communicate with others. If you want to be happy, learn how to communicate with yourself. And if you want a great relationship, master both of those. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. If there's somebody you think that would need better communication, send them the link, have them listen to the recording. Come and take the survey at arguelesslovemore.net/survey. You'll find out about yourself and your skills, and be compassionate. You know, we weren't taught how to be this. We didn't have the role models we wanted growing up. At least I didn't, Candace didn't, a lot of people didn't. Ciao, have a great day. Thanks.